welcome to a special episode of Wide Angle. Today we have with us the former Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir and National Conference leader Omar Abdullah to discuss what has been going on in Kashmir politics in the last few days. Now, of course, politics has always made for strange bedfellows. We've seen the most unlikely alliances break recently in Jammu and Kashmir when the BJP and the PDP split about 5 months ago. The assembly since then, in suspended animation, has finally been dissolved, and this on a night when the former Chief Minister Mehbooba Mufti, along with support from the National Conference and at that moment the Congress party, decided to go ahead and stake claim. That was followed by a counter-claim by the BJP and Sajad Lone. Now, what actually happened that night is still unclear because things moved very quickly. But more importantly, what does this mean going forward for the future of Jammu and Kashmir politics? Omar Abdullah, thanks very much for giving The Wire this interview. I think, again, let's just go back to the events of that night as they unfolded, because things were happening very, very quickly. I mean, we now know that the fax machine in Raj Bhavan wasn't working, which is why he didn't get the letter that was taking claim from all of you. But the bigger question is, who would have thought that the PDP and the NC would have decided to come together like this?
I think anybody who saw developments immediately after the 2014 Assembly results came out should have seen that it was a possibility. Early 2015, I, on behalf of the National Conference, offered support, unconditional support to Mufti Muhammad Sayyid Saab, precisely for the reasons that we came together a few days ago, which was to protect the state from the onslaught that we felt the BJP would mount, particularly against the J&K special status, against the communal harmony that exists there, and also against the very fragile peace that we've been able to develop. Unfortunately, in 2015, Mufti Sayyid said no. And you know how the last few years unfolded. This coming together a few days ago was necessitated again by exactly the situation that I had foreseen in 2015 actually unfolding over these last few years.
But it was seen in that moment also as extremely opportunistic, because the assembly has been in suspended animation, had been for I think about 5 months when the BJP and the PDP alliance split. It was unclear who was going to try and stake claim to form the government. There were talks of a rift in the PDP, factionalism over there, defections, and things like that. But the NC had sort of stayed out of that conversation for a while and had been, as you tweeted that night, in fact, and said that the NC had been pushing for a dissolution in any case. So given that you had been pushing for a dissolution, to then pledge support in this Mahagathbandhan, as they call it in Jammu and Kashmir, seemed opportunistic.
Not at all. In fact, completely sort of out of the glare of publicity, I had made it known to first Governor Vohra, then Governor Malik Sahab, and also to the BJP through intermediaries, that so long as no attempts at breaking political parties was sort of the yardstick that they would follow, the National Conference would stay out of any sort of government formation moves. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Otherwise, how else would miraculously, suddenly, within minutes, the BJP and its proxies create 18 MLAs that they claimed the support of? Clearly, and the governor in his report and also in the press note talked about horse trading and the attempt to buy MLAs. The unfortunate thing is the BJP didn't play by the rules of responsible politics where Jammu and Kashmir is concerned. They attacked J&K special status, which again necessitated action on our part, but they also made concerted attempts to break political parties and to indulge in horse trading. Look, Jammu and Kashmir has paid a very heavy price for this sort of horse trading in the past. I mean, history is replete with examples of where political parties were split and J&K has paid a price for it. We didn't want to see that happening again.
So tell me, on the one hand, when you say that there was nothing opportunistic and this is something that was well thought about as far as the National Conference is concerned, there's also a different way of looking at it. I mean, given the fact that you had been asking for a dissolution all this time, perhaps things have worked out the way you intended?
Well, this wasn't the end goal that we had in mind when we offered support. That having been said, I'm not sort of deeply disappointed with this outcome because this, I mean, is the best consolation prize we could have had. It's not what we set out to achieve, but if this is all we get, then I'll live with that.
So, as a response to what happened and the subsequent dissolution, we've seen lots of comments by senior leaders of the BJP. You had a sort of Twitter spat, if you want to call it that, with Ram Madhav, where the PDP and the NC were both actually accused of taking orders from Pakistan when it came to setting up this alliance. The Congress party, which was seemingly also a part of this, when the note was sent, we saw Ghulam Nabi Azad on national television that very night virtually withdraw from the letter of support that had been already sent to the governor.
Well, from what I understand, yeah, I mean, Ms. Mehbooba Mufti sent an intimation to the governor about a proposal to stake claim, but no letters from the National Conference or Congress had gone to the PDP. We had verbally committed our support, so I'm not sure what Azad Sahab was sort of pulling back from or withdrawing. Because there hadn't been a written intimation of support to the PDP, though from all the conversations I've had with Congress leaders and with Altaf Bukhari, who was the intermediary on behalf of the PDP, I mean, the Congress's support was committed.
So then what changed?
I have no idea. You'll have to ask Azad Sahab. I don't think anything changed. The governor dissolved the House.
And this comment that came from members of the BJP that you all were taking your orders from Pakistan, and that's why you decided to...
Pakistan is sort of the trump card, so to speak, that the BJP rolls out when it's deeply frustrated. When it wants to attack a journalist, they go to Pakistan. When they want to attack Kashmiri politicians or Kashmiris as a whole, they call them Pakistanis. I think it was a reflection of the frustration that the BJP felt at having their grand designs foiled. Clearly, they had aimed to split the National Conference, the Congress, the PDP, and install a proxy with their support as Chief Minister. That plan was foiled. So what you see, the sort of public reaction, both on the part of BJP and some of their friends in Kashmir, is simply a reflection of that frustration.
So there are many sort of contradictions, and I think Kashmir is also a story of the several contradictions that exist within the political class. On the one hand, local elections were boycotted. Now we're looking at an assembly election ahead of schedule, really. Lots of contradictions.
No contradictions. For one, the local body elections, the boycott, essentially, I mean, it became necessary for us to get Government of India to understand the seriousness with which we view the attacks on Article 35A and Article 370. And plus, linking the urban local bodies to 35A and 370 was done by the BJP. It was done by the central government. They were the ones who took this defense to the Supreme Court, saying, look, we have urban local body and panchayat elections. Please don't schedule any hearings for Article 35A and 370. So they are the ones who actually drew a link between those two acts of law and the elections that were taking place. So there's no contradiction there. But we also maintain that, look, at the end of the day, Article 35A has to be protected both by the state government as well as by the central government. And therefore, we're not going to give an open field to the BJP and its proxies that we will stay away and leave the field for them to do what they please with.
So in all this, do you think that the people who actually really end up looking opportunistic is the BJP?
How else would you explain 18 MLAs in a letter sent to the governor? Where are those 18 MLAs today? I mean, the governor, as I said, I made that point earlier, the governor in his press note has categorically said that horse trading was taking place and reports of money changing hands to buy MLAs were also received by the governor. And then you have a claim for government formation with 18 MLAs belonging to parties other than the BJP and its proxies sent. So, I mean, is that not opportunism? Then what is it?
So, Omar, this entire sort of political spectacle that's unfolded is also taking place against the backdrop of, I mean, it sounds almost ludicrous to say it because every conversation about Kashmir says worsening security situation. Now, that's a mild way of putting the situation as it is today, because it has been worsening and, you know, further spiraling for the last now almost 3 years. We've seen a spate of attacks. We've seen extremely gruesome terrorist attacks, targeted killings, sniper attacks, attacks on security forces. I mean, where do you think you're going to be able to press upon the people of the state, the central government, to say, all right, the politics aside, can we all sit down together and see really what the crux of the problem is right now? Because the challenge is to arrest the violence from worsening.
Well, with this government, you won't be able to. We are hoping that given the spate of mistakes that Prime Minister Modi and his government have made over the last few years, including the complete mishandling of the situation in Jammu and Kashmir, that come the general election of 2019, we will have a new dispensation in power in Delhi. And then we can pick up the pieces, because nothing positive has happened under Prime Minister Modi's government, particularly internally. Externally, okay, there have been fits and starts. You had Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif attending his swearing in, you had Prime Minister Modi attending a wedding, now you have the developments with the corridor, the Kartarpur corridor, so that's something that came out of the blue. But otherwise, if you look at it internally, between New Delhi and the state of Jammu and Kashmir, you have an interlocutor who's been appointed who unfortunately has nothing to show for his efforts thus far. So we are working towards a new dispensation in Delhi after 2019 elections, and we'll take it from there.
Speaking of interlocutors, there's been a very interesting news report in the papers this weekend, which is of a Norwegian envoy going and meeting separatist leaders in Srinagar. Now, we don't know what the genesis of those meetings really were, but Norway has a track record in international mediation with Sri Lanka. What do you make of this?
Interesting. Interesting for a number of reasons. As you rightly pointed out, Norway has a track record of getting involved in conflicts. So the fact that they're in Jammu and Kashmir, shouldn't surprise anyone, but also should surprise people, because I'm sure Norway wants to get involved, but government of India...
I mean, it's antithetical to every position of the government.
Successive governments in India have said that, look, we have no problem with facilitation, but we will not stomach mediation.
Right.
You've had President Clinton who facilitated post-Kargil, and there have been numerous other examples. In this case, the Norwegians actually, where Sri Lanka was concerned, were mediating.
Right.
What they're doing in Jammu and Kashmir now, only government of India knows. But what is even more surprising for me is the completely muted reaction on the part of the BJP. I mean, ask yourself this question: if Dr. Manmohan Singh had been in power and the Norwegians had come and met separatists in Kashmir, would the BJP not have blown up and said, hey, look at this, Dr. Manmohan Singh has rewritten policy, the Norwegians are mediating in Kashmir, etc., etc., etc. Here you have a report, the Norwegians are reported to have met the separatists. There's been no denial from anybody, and yet listening to the voices from the BJP or even other political parties, it's like it never happened. I have no problem with this. I think that if Government of India is unwilling to talk of its own accord, then somebody needs to prod them in the right direction. So if the Norwegians are going to be able to do it, damn good. But I think we need a little bit more transparency on the part of Government of India. I mean, if the Norwegians were allowed to come, what is the agenda? And is this purely a dialogue with the separatists, or is it going to be widened to include other stakeholders? That's something I'd like to know. But on the face of it, I have no problem with this.
So when it comes to sort of widening to allow other stakeholders, conventional wisdom based on the developments we see around us today indicate that whether it's the India-Pakistan peace process, whether it is actually working internally on trying to mitigate some of the tensions in Kashmir, it's really not a priority given that they're going into a major general election. But the second part of that is also whether they would use both these issues as part of an election campaign. And if so, how? Are you concerned?
I think we'll have to wait and see whether there are any further developments on this. On the face of it, just what you've had up until now is not really election worthy material. It's not emotional enough. I don't see this as, I mean, unless there are further developments after this. What you've had up until now, I don't think would be something that the BJP, or for that matter any political party, would take to the election campaign outside of Jammu and Kashmir.
And what about the recent terror attacks that we've been seeing? Is that likely to play into the election campaign? And if so, how? What are your concerns?
I very much doubt it. Terror in Jammu and Kashmir now is a 30-year-old story. It ebbs and flows, but I mean, it's not. Unless, again, I sort of add the caveat that unless something spectacular happens between now and the elections, then of course. But with the current levels of violence as they are and as they have been, as you pointed out, for the last few years, I don't see this as an election issue. I wish it was. I keep making the point that the opposition really needs to talk about this more, along with his failure on the employment front, along with his failure with demonetization, along with a few other failures of Prime Minister Modi. I believe Jammu and Kashmir ranks amongst his biggest failures. You just have to see the situation 2014 Parliament election when he took over, and 2018-19 now, when we're going into another election, to see just how badly Jammu and Kashmir has been mismanaged. So it should be an issue, but I don't think it is.
So tell me now, given that in general we're going into election mode, and now specifically in Jammu and Kashmir also, we're assuming that these elections, if they are meant to be scheduled soon, will happen somewhere alongside the general election. That's the assumption, but no one knows.
I think it's a safe assumption to make because the Supreme Court is very clear that 6 months, within 6 months, and at the earliest possible opportunity. I think the earliest possible opportunity will be along with Parliament elections. And there's no reason not to have them. You've just had urban local body elections, which the turnout wasn't great, but the authorities were busy patting themselves on the back at a well-conducted election. You have panchayat elections going on and the turnout has been reasonably decent.
Okay, yeah.
So I see no reason why they shouldn't be able to have Parliament and Assembly elections together.
So what about the challenge that you all face, that given that you are willing to come together and form a government now, will the PDP and NC, I mean, it sort of confounds any logic, but would you consider a post-poll alliance? Forget a pre-poll alliance.
I don't think either party is fighting this election to end up in an alliance
with each other,
with anybody post the results. I'd like to believe that Jammu and Kashmir is fed up of coalition experiments. You've had similar examples in other states that toyed with coalitions for a few terms and then went back to single party governments. Again, I make the point with UP. You had numerous coalitions and then suddenly you had a stable Akhilesh Yadav government and now a stable BJP government. I'd like to believe that since 2002, we've had nothing but instability in coalitions. Perhaps the people of Jammu and Kashmir are a little tired of this and will vote a single party into power. That's what we're working towards. But I mean, we have to see what the people decide. Do
you think you suffered an anti-incumbency wave in the last state assembly elections? Do you think you've recovered from that?
Difficult to tell. I'd like to believe that the people are willing to give us another chance. We need to go out and convince them that we've learned lessons that we'll put into place. But I've learned never to take voters for granted. So we'll work hard and see what happens.
Right. Omar Abdullah, thanks so much for speaking to The Wire. Thanks a lot.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.